So the session is called What is a Computer Now? And you are building a coding agent called AMP.
Yep.
And why don't you first give us an introduction of what AMP code does?
Yeah, awesome. So first of all, thanks everyone for being here. This is like, what a venue, right? What an amazing place to be talking about coding agents and like what the future entails. My name is Beyang. I work at a company called AMP. We build a coding agent. I think our tagline is we want to be the frontier coding agent. So essentially pushing the frontier as far as possible in terms of what you can do with coding agents, how much automation you can get out of them. A couple things that we've been known for so far, we're very opinionated about the types of models that we use for specific tasks. So rather than having an arbitrary model selector, we're very intentional about designing the harness to fit the model and building that whole system for specific things like your main coding agent, or thinking deeply about a debugging problem, or designing the UI, or searching the code base. We have a different sub-agent for each of those things. And we've also built from day one for sort of like a team way of building. So one of the things that I think we were the first on is we sync all the threads that AMP you have with the coding agent to a central server, and that becomes sort of like a shared knowledge base for your entire team to kind of like learn what the latest best practices of coding agents is.
Awesome. I'm really excited about this conversation because I've been a user and a big fan of AMP, like from afar, and you just talked about many things that I want to dive deeper into. But first, I think you made a really interesting and radical choice recently around sunsetting the ID extension product where AMP just started. And I'm sure that many founders and product builders here are kind of like navigating similar challenges where you kind of have a new vision for the product because of the ever-changing landscape. And it takes a lot of courage to not fall into sunk cost and say that, okay, we're going to kill this product and move on to the next, which is kind of related to the topic of a computer. So if you think about the IDE as like the old computer for developers, like what is this new one that you're now building?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for those of you who don't know, like AMP historically has had two main clients. We've had a TUI, a terminal UI, and also an editor extension. I think one of the first contrarian things we did was we didn't fork VS Code. We just built a regular editor extension. But recently we came to the sort of like realization that we no longer believe that even that minimal editor extension was kind of the future of building software with agents. And so we kind of made the somewhat controversial decision to basically sunset that, while probably around half of our user base was still using it. And I think that gets to this like weird time that we're living through. I think like the conversation with Aaron just before, he was talking about like innovator's dilemma. And I think like a lot of people in tech in Silicon Valley have sort of like internalized what innovator's dilemma. Like we've all read the book at this point and probably listened to like a bunch of podcasts or conference talks about it. But I think maybe people have not yet fully internalized the degree to which these like innovation waves are hitting now, where like literally like year after year, there's like another successive wave. So whereas before, you might create a product, it gains success, and it grows, and then there's sort of this like S curve that you write out for that product line. I think now what our opinion is you have to be even more aggressive in terms of sunsetting existing products if you no longer have a thesis around, this is going to be part of what the future looks like. And what does that future look like? The short answer is, in the medium term, we're focused on the terminal UI because we think that's a closer approximation of the future than the editor was. And the slightly longer answer is the new thing we're still working on building. So I can't really articulate what it is right now, but it is going to be longer chains of automation And I think we're going to use a lot of different types of sandboxes to construct these validation loops that help agents work more autonomously.
Yeah, and I think it's already consensus now that you kind of mentioned AMP code tries to be the one that leverages the technical frontier of models, and it's really built with that audience in mind. And coding agents, out of all the existing agents, are also the most, I would say, resource consumptive and are leveraging some of these new features of potentially an agent computer.
Yeah.
So I like that, like, you kind of think a lot in metaphors, and you're kind of like referencing potentially like what does a kernel look like, what does a user space look like what do these like traditional ways that we think about computers, and how do they kind of translate into this new agent computer.
Yeah, I think it's it's really weird because it's a really weird time to be alive, especially building software. And if you look at the coding agent landscape, right, it's like everyone and their mom is building a coding agent now. And historically, you could say, you could take a step back and say like, oh wow, like that space is like overcrowded now. Let's find something else. But I actually think the way I think about it is, we're literally at the cusp of inventing a new form of computer. So if you go back to like previous waves where there's like a new paradigm, like when the PC was invented, or even further, like when Unix was first created, back when people were working on mainframes, and every mainframe company had their own like not quite Unix, but is their kind of like base layer operating system. I think the era we're living in is kind of like that, where we need to essentially build from the ground up the computing stack. Like, there's so much of the existing computing stack that may not make sense anymore, given that we have technology that allows you to just like talk to a computer. And so,
what are some examples of that in terms of the old computing stack no longer making sense?
Oh, I would say like 99.9% of user space software is essentially a button panel. Because the innovation of the pre-AI era was in order to make computers accessible and economically useful to like normal human beings, you had to present like a visual way of interacting with things. So like you point and click your way through a workflow, and most of the applications people build are essentially a way for a human to kind of point and click their way through a particular workflow. And now with agents, it's just like that whole, the whole layer of abstractions, everything from like your front-end widgets all the way down to like the system calls that thing is doing, is maybe it's still necessary in some capacity, but like you certainly wouldn't build it that way if you were thinking from the ground up. Like imagine if you'd gone back to like the 1970s and said like, oh, in addition to being able to like execute very precise algorithms, you can also just talk to your computer and have it sort of like understand what you're, like, we would be living in a very different world.
Totally.
Like you'd have different kind of like foundational layers of abstraction than I think we do now.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting that you kind of talked about UIs, user spaces, because one thing that as a user of AMP code that struck me was that you guys are actually quite intentional with developer experience. What to abstract away, like for example, model selection. Also, I think that you guys are pretty intentional about what context to actually show the user, where you don't show like every step of the reasoning process, but only show the relevant context. Can you like share a little bit about like this design philosophy around what to abstract, what not to abstract, still given that there's still maybe some humans using the coding agent, but also potentially a different interfaces for other agents to consume the code that the agents generate.
Yeah, so I think what, for the people who know us, we're kind of known as being like the most opinionated agent, and sometimes that is controversial because there's other solutions out there that, let you select the model, you can use any model, and, lets you swap in, this, that, or the other like tool calls. And so, that gives you, freedom of choice in some sense. And a lot of people like that, and no shade on that approach at all. But I think the way we think about it is things are moving so quickly right now that the cost of presenting like choices at multiple layers to the end user essentially makes it so that you don't have a unified product or agent experience. It also complexifies every sort of like interaction you have around, like, someone reported a bug. Okay, what configuration were they running? Which model were they using? There's like this long tail of information that you want to collect. And the environment that we're in, given how quickly the technology is evolving, you have to be opinionated, because we view our job almost as it's not just delivering a product to a user, it's figuring out what the future of building software entirely looks like. So in some sense, we're not following the traditional playbook of like, we're not trying to serve every developer in the world. In fact, like part of the company thesis behind AMP is we want to be intentional. We want to select the portion of developers and users who are just like batshit crazy and want to live on the bleeding edge and are willing to sign up for essentially like a journey or a ride to go figure out what all the weird new ways in which these things can be used, these models can be used. And so for that reason, we restrict user choice in some ways so that we can be more opinionated about the whole vertical stack. Everything from the harness to the model to the sandbox environment to the things that we integrate with.
Yeah. One of the, like you said, it's both innovator's dilemma, but the other very difficult balance, I think, for product builders in this day and age is to figure out how much to involve human in the loop. There's this obviously big debate, I'm sure, in the coding agent community of like, we still need the IDE, and because we need human in the loop, but it ended up people just want to vibe with Claude Code and abstract all that away. So since you're kind of building for a very advanced audience, what parts of the workflow do you think are important to continue to give the developer control and agency? And where do you think that it should just completely be abstracted away and exert opinions so that the coding agent can maximize its power?
Yeah, I think my view is that humans still matter.
Wow.
And if anything, they matter more than ever. It's actually never been a better time, believe it or not, to be a human, I think, on the planet Earth. Despite what the doomers say. And I think that right now there's this false dichotomy when people talk about how they use coding agents. On the one end of that dichotomy are the people who are like, no, you can't trust the models to do anything beyond very simple things. You have to babysit them. You have to be like very much in the inner loop guiding them. Otherwise, they'll go off the rails, and then you'll end up spending more time like reviewing and correcting mistakes. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think you have people just saying like, oh, like all your years of engineering experience, it's a liability now. Like it's better to be a pure vibe coder. Just toss all that like systems knowledge and intuition around like what makes good technical architectures away. And it's funny because like these two sides kind of like yell at each other on Twitter all day. And that's sort of like the conversation. Like it's agglomerated to these like two poles. I think the reality is a lot more nuanced. If you talk to like real practitioners who are like actually building stuff with agents, not just like talking about building stuff with agents, I think where we're going to go to is it's still critically important. Like all agents, all software really, the function is to be a lever on human intent. Like you have some goal that you want to achieve as a human. And in some sense, you are the source of agency for the agents, right? Like agents are not, they do not have agency of their own. They are prompted to do things. And so the human is the source of agency, and the question is how can we amplify that agency? And if you want to amplify human agency, it's very important for the human to have an understanding of what's actually going on, right? So I think where the world is moving toward is you're going to have systems that are very good at helping humans accumulate the sort of like intuition or mental model of what the existing system, your existing piece of software does, figuring out, okay, like these are the levers that I can pull, or here are the like directions I can move next. And then I, as a human, can express my intent through typing or speaking to the agent. And then to close the loop, you'll have the agent generate artifacts that allow humans to quickly verify correctness without having to like painstakingly read through every single line and character of generated code. So like that artifact generation is maybe like the biggest bottleneck right now, because I think if you talk to coding agent practitioners, I think it's no longer, it's probably consensus now to say that code review is the bottleneck, right? Like the biggest pain point of using coding agents is like, oh man, code review, I have to spend all this time like reading through, and that's because we have not yet developed systems that are efficient and comprehensive verifiers of code other than reading through diffs.
How are your point of view on, obviously there are many now AI code review companies that are in the market.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Here's my take, and I'll answer the question more generally. I would say they're definitely solving for a need. Like the need is very apparent right now, and I think I think there's a lot of economic value that they're providing currently. I think the way that we think on the AMP team is, if you look at the traditional steps of the SDLC, the kind of like 6 or 7 stage diagram that every like enterprise dev tools company drew to go and pitch senior engineers at like JP Morgan or whatever.
Yeah.
That whole picture was created and kind of like stabilized in a world that no longer exists. And so that whole cycle, I think, needs to be reinvented. And part of what we're trying to do at AMP is not just build a coding agent for the way people work now. It's also like reinventing the way that like software is built. So like one of the controversial things that we do that some people go like, oh wow, is like we do not do code review at all. We are a push to main team. And in spite of that, we do have large banking customers. And we've been able to demonstrate that like we're able to build in a way that preserves the security and robustness of the user experience. But the reason we are push to main is because we no longer, we don't think that the historical, like push to, and then like open up your diff in GitHub PRs, and then you can't even like jump to def, and there's a bunch of async comments, and then you go get a coffee while you wait for another person to review your code. That is like kind of like orders of magnitude too slow as a feedback loop. And I think if you're still doing that like a year or 2 from now, it's probably a sign that your rate of iteration is not fast enough. And like our mortal fear, I'm not gonna sit up here and pretend that like, we have all the answers and we're 100% confident. Like, I think everyone is like, holy crap, like there's so much uncertainty, how do you even know it? So like, one of the things that keeps us up at night is the fear that we will fall behind. Like anything that slows us down, that prevents us from being like on the cutting edge of figuring out where this whole journey is going, we got to throw out the window.
Yeah, like many founders, I'm sure, have very similar concerns. And actually one thing that you just shared earlier backstage that stuck with me was kind of your philosophy on unit economics. And it's important, I think, in this age of uncertainty, as you mentioned, to have optionality. So it would be great to share a little bit with the audience what
yeah, so
is.
I think AMP is weirdly contrarian in that I think we're one of the few coding agents that is unit economic positive. Like we do not lose money at the margins on token cost. And so like this has led to the perception among a lot of people that we're expensive, right? Because we're essentially passing through the inference costs to the users. And that, of course, selects a lot of people out of the market. Like a lot of people would prefer the great deal you get on tokens from people giving away tokens for flat rates or whatnot. On the converse side, it does select for the people who are willing to pay a premium to experience the thing that we're building. But the reason that we've kind of like gone with this strategy is there's so many things that I say now that like even like a year, 18 months ago, me would have been like, no, that's crazy. Like that goes against every sort of like piece of conventional wisdom. I think like one of the things that if you're building in startup land, you've internalized by now is like, okay, like everyone knows the game, right? Like turning a profit is for chumps. What you really want to do is you want to capture a market. There's a whole market to capture, and once you conquer that market, you have a moat, and then you can essentially like squeeze your customers for the duration of however long this cycle lasts. And usually,
infinite terminum value of the business.
Yeah, and in theory it's infinite, but like practically speaking, every 10 years or so there's like a new thing. The issue now is that like it's not 10 years. You get 10 years of like value extraction. It's literally like a year if you're lucky, maybe 6 months.
Yep.
And so I think basically like what our value prop is we are all about staying nimble and being on the frontier, and there's a certain set of people who wants to come with us and to essentially get there first. Like we have customers that are essentially trying to outcompete their competitors. Like if you're the number 2 bank in a particular market, and you're gunning for number 1, software is a great piece of leverage for you to do that. And if you're doing that, you're willing to like go along with like this crazy bunch of people who are trying to do that, and also pay for that. So like we're very intentionally like not trying to capture we're not trying to capture like 100% of the developer market. I think we just want to select for the set of people who we think really get it and are going to use us and help us figure out what the future looks like and to win in their kind of respective markets.
Yeah, totally. To bring kind of us back a little bit on computer as a topic, because there's obviously a meme that everything is computer, but there's also now a meme that everything is software.
Yeah.
And I think that being a coding agent is so interesting because I think people start to provocatively ask, like, can't all work be done with a coding agent? How does this evolve beyond, you think, the use case of software engineer in the future?
Yeah. I think if you look at like past computer revolutions, I think like things start with the developer tooling and then move outward. Mm-hmm. So I think this one will kind of follow the same general pattern where things will start with the coding agents, and the lessons learned therein and the emergent patterns from that will then inform how you build agents for every other part of your life, every other part of the economy. So again, that's why we're starting with coding as the target use case, because at the end of the day, to do interesting things with software agents, you have to produce code. Even if you're not writing it by hand, you have to generate the code somehow. And in the process of figuring out how to do that most effectively, you also figure out how other people are trying to like use this technology for all the different diverse economic use cases that are out there.
Are there any potential things that you use for yourself using M code for your personal workflow?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Actually, someone on our team built this command line utility that's called AGG, A-G-G, and it's basically like a riff on an inside joke that's probably not worth getting into here. But essentially, AGG is just, you think of it as like a portal. It's like an execution layer to all the other kind of like tools that you might want to use. So I think like everyone here has heard of OpenClaw right now. I think like one of the challenges with like OpenClaw is amazing. I think it's really demonstrated the potential for what agents can do for just like everything, not just coding. But of course, like the thing that gives you pause with OpenClaw as like an engineer is just the security story. And so what AGG is basically a way to provide like access to Slack, access to emails, access to like all these things, but in a way where like the authentication is encapsulated. And I think the idea there is like eventually it becomes maybe a thing that can kind of like gatekeep certain types of operations as well. So the short answer is yes, I use AMP for all sorts of things. I'll even use it as, it's funny, like the more you get accustomed to a particular coding agent, the more it becomes kind of like your default for everything. So now I'll even go to AMP to ask like questions completely unrelated to code.
Totally. I think that more and more so, we're going to give all of our life to coding agents to help us make decisions.
Yeah.
So I guess like the final question here is, given you are kind of building for this like really advanced audience, how much of your roadmap and your future is driven by what you hear from the user? Because obviously a big lesson in Silicon Valley is like build something people love, listen to your user, talk to your customers.
Yeah.
And how much of that is driven by your own or like the team's vision and opinions?
Yeah.
Given you are taking this opinionated approach.
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I think we obviously have a vision of where we think things are going, and sort of like a sense of like taste and intuition that we've curated and believe in. But at the same time, we do pay attention to our users a lot. Like we've learned a lot from our users in terms of like the different ways that they're using agents. I think what we do, perhaps like more intentionally than a lot of others, is again we're not trying to go after like every single developer. It's almost like part of the go-to-market strategy for AMP is like curating the set of users that we have using the product, because we want the people who want to be on the cutting edge and are kind of crazy and are going to propose crazy ideas, because we view that as sort of like good input into our human-run RL process of like building this product. We want the people, the inputs coming into us from the outside to be from human minds that we've sort of like curated, who kind of like share the sense of taste and share the almost just like forward-lookingness that we do.
You can always fire your users.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's, again, this is like contrary to every standard playbook out there. Like the hardest part of building a startup is getting users 1, 2, and 3, and at an early stage, it's anathema to say like, oh, we're going to fire you. Like if anything, you double down. But I think we've already had, like we never like rude or anything, but like half our users were using the editor extension, and we wrote a very nice blog post and gave a few months head notice of like, this is where we think we're headed. Here are the reasons why we think you should switch. But at the end of the day, like the people who really love that editor experience kind of now have to find another option.
Yeah. No, this has been amazing. No, thank you so much and check out M Code if you haven't already. Great product. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.